Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Dave Spooner. Thanks for being on the show, Dave.
Yeah, Whitney, thanks for having me. Pleasure being here.
Now I'm looking forward to the conversation. But before we get in, I wanted to remind the listeners to go to Life Bridge Capital, go to the Contact Us page and sign up there. And so that way we can connect with you and we'll schedule a call with you personally, and I'll try to help you any way I can. And just to get to know you and our listeners a little better. So do that. Share the show. We would appreciate that as well. But a little bit about Dave Spooner. He's the co-founder of Innago, a free property management platform designed to simplify life for small to mid-sized landlords. He has been involved in the real estate technology space for the last 6 years. Recently purchased his first multifamily rental property. So welcome to the rental world, Dave. It's awesome that you're getting into the space, but I'm looking forward to diving into your expertise here of just this property management software and even evaluating property manager, things we should be looking at on a day-to-day basis, that our property managers should be doing. And diving into even the software that they're using and what it should be showing us. So, but give the listeners a little more about who you are, and let's jump in.
Yeah, thanks so much for the intro. So I, like you said, Whitney, I am one of the co-founders of Innago. We provide simple, easy-to-use tools for small to mid-sized landlords, and we give them away for free, which obviously is a great benefit for those that are watching their cash flow and making sure their margins are looking good. I've been involved in the real estate space for about 6 years, coming up on 7 soon, actually. And I finally decided about 3 to 4 months ago to put my money where my mouth is and purchase my first rental property and get some experience on the other side of things. We talk a lot about how great an investment real estate is, and it was finally time for me to do that myself.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It continues to grow, in that aspect of your business as well. And so I wanted us to jump in because you are very knowledgeable about, the software and the things this management companies should be showing us through their software and those things. But I thought you could help us in evaluating property managers, some things from your side of the table that maybe you could help us to understand, to know we're using a management company or, that's reputable or somebody that we should be looking at. So how do you evaluate a property manager?
Yeah, so in all the studies that we've done and all the studies that we've read up on and the feedback that we've gotten from our own users and users throughout the property management space, the number one factor in managing properties and managing tenants more efficiently seems to us to be communicating guidelines, communicating rules, and sticking to those rules and those guidelines. So finding a good system, and I'm not referring just to a software-based system, but a good system in place for managing that communication piece and making sure that everything is clearly defined for your tenants is critical to managing your properties and managing your tenants more efficiently. Many landlords know that the most obvious example, of course, is late fees, right? Once you give them a little bit, they'll take a lot, right? But that's true for a lot of different pieces when it comes to property management and managing your tenants. So make sure whatever property manager you put in place, that they have a clearly defined set of rules and expectations for their tenants, and that they also reflect those clearly defined rules and expectations with the way that they treat you as the investor or as the owner of the property as well.
I like that. So, communicating guidelines and having a system to manage that communication. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What is that? Is there ways that you've seen that done really well as far as communicating those guidelines?
Well, I mean, software can really help in this aspect, right? Because software is going to automate a lot of these different pieces, whether it's reminding tenants when rent is due, whether it's automating the late fee process, whether it's enforcing those late fees once they do hit, or tracking when leases have been opened, signed, et cetera. So software is going to help a lot. But even just sitting down and having the property manager give you a list of their rules and how they manage and how they enforce can be a great way for them to articulate to you how they're going to approach managing managing your property. A lot of landlords or a lot of property managers may say, oh yeah, I do that. I'll take care of that. No problem. But they might not have that clearly defined set of rules. And as they grow as a property manager, as they add personnel, as a business owner yourself, I'm sure you know this, it gets harder and harder internally to enforce those best practices when it comes to management. So if they can demonstrate to you that they have clearly thought about this, that it's not just something that they talk about or not just something that they intuitively know how to do, that's something that they can communicate down the line within their organization and continually enforce with their tenants and their properties, that's going to go a long way. So when you're evaluating a property manager, another great thing to do is ask for them to give you that list, show you, what do you do when this type of situation arises? How are you going to communicate financials to me? How are you going to get rent to me? Make sure that they agree to all of that up front in a very clear manner.
Yeah, how are you going to communicate financials with me? That's a pretty big thing. Like, you need to know.
Right.
You need to know how you're going to see that and what you're going to see. And is it even in a manner that I can understand? Does it make sense to me? Do they have abbreviations of something that I don't even know what it is? So maybe you could talk about some of the day-to-day financials or just that aspect of the business that we should be thinking about on a day-to-day management basis.
Yeah, well, you touched on a really good note, which is there's kind of a lot of different ways to handle that financial reporting piece. And there's a lot of different structures in ways that landlords look at and consider different reports. They might call the same report or call different reports the same thing. And you ask for a rent roll and you get something that you're not really familiar with. The classic kind of most common definition of a rent roll is the future value and current value of all of your leased units. But a lot of landlords look at it as what's owed and what's been paid so far this year. So that's just one example of a financial report that you might be saying one thing and your property manager is thinking a totally different thing. Again, software can help a lot with this because it formalizes these processes. It takes the rent and it puts it in a set manner that everybody is comfortable and familiar with. It also makes all of these reports transparent and visible for everybody. So a good software package is going to allow you as the owner or you as the somebody that's invested in the syndicate to see what the financial picture is of your property and pull those reports up at any time. So when you do set up with your property manager originally, you should ask them for some sample reports. What are the types of reports you're going to give me? And go through it thoroughly and make sure you have a clear understanding of what everything means in those reports. And then ask them how you continue to have access to that, whether it's, will I receive this monthly? Will I receive this quarterly? Can I log in at any time to a portal and see this type of thing? How do you have access and how do you continue to familiarize yourself with that data?
No, so I'm glad you brought that up. How do I have access to the system, and what should we expect there? What if the management company uses some type of software where they say, well, I'm going to email you, these reports on a monthly basis. What's your response to that, and what should we expect?
Yeah, I mean, emailing is a totally fine way to go. If the property manager can pull those reports for you and send them off to you, and they do that in a timely manner, and you're comfortable and familiar with those, that is perfectly fine. Obviously, the best case is typically when you can log in and see that yourself. Now, one word of caution, and I'm really saying this to look out for those property managers out there. It's kind of like the stock market. They say that if you have the Yahoo Finance app, you shouldn't be checking your stocks every day because you'll make some knee-jerk decisions based on some news or something that popped up. And you might have some properties that aren't performing that well one month. Maybe it's because the landlord hasn't entered in the rent that's been paid. Or maybe there's just a rash of tenants that are paying rent late and the landlord's the property manager is trying to figure out how to deal with that. There's kind of a double-edged sword with having daily access, but it is important to have it when you need it. It's important to have that access on demand when you need to generate reports or you need to make a decision for a future investment or just to continue to funnel money into a specific investment. However, just word of caution, make sure that you're not kind of backseat driving with your property manager. If you're confident that you've picked a good one, give them the space to make your properties more efficient and manage those a little bit better.
No, I can appreciate that. I'm glad you said that as well. And so you don't have that knee-jerk reaction. And I can see where property management companies may not want to give everybody too much access, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, so you don't. You're not analyzing and picking at every little thing every day anyway. Obviously, we got to analyze those things in great detail and see where we can improve and make sure they're performing as well as far as a property manager. But more times than not, that property manager, if you've picked a good one, understands the market and understands their business better than we do, and that's why.
Exactly.
I mean, that's ultimately why we're hiring them, because they can do it better than us. And so, I would like to ask though about like differences in software, and what are some differences that we may see as far as this software to the next, and or is it even things that we should be concerned about? Are there things that are like deal breakers that say, oh, wait a minute, that I just wouldn't do it because that software does this, or I have to name a specific software, but maybe because I'm not going to be very knowledgeable about different types of property. I know of different types of management software, of course, and I have opinion about a couple, but not the whole industry of them. And so anything in the software specifically that is like, okay, this is a must, or this is something that we need to avoid.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that I'll answer it in a couple different parts. So first of all, I think one thing that commonly startles landlords, property owners, property managers, et cetera, the first time they dive into a property management software is if they do include online payments in that software, which is often a big reason that folks jump towards management software is in order to enable online payments. Oftentimes they're startled by the delay in the delivery of the funds. Folks are like, I expect it to be like a check. I expect it to hit my account the next day. And oftentimes it takes quite a bit longer. There's pretty wide variance in different softwares and how long they take to deliver those funds. So be sure that you're aware of that, especially if you're cash flow tight. If you need those funds to pay your mortgage right after rent is paid, then be aware when the money's going to come into your account. Innago, shameless plug here, we do deliver the funds after just one business day, but that's not true for everybody. Others do as well, but not a ton of them. Something to be aware of as you're looking at software. Some of the other major differences, we kind of categorize management software in two different spaces. You have the legacy players that have been around for quite a while, and you may be familiar with like a Yardi or even an Appfolio, which is now 10, 15 years old. Those folks have been around for a while. They've been in the market for quite a while, and they offer a ton of different features, but they were built in an old market that had different values, and it had different sets of expectation. And as a result, they're oftentimes maybe not the most intuitive. They offer a ton for you, but it does have a pretty steep learning curve. Again, just be aware of that. They can still be great software for you. They can be a little bit on the pricey side, but they're going to give you a ton for what you pay. Just know that you're going to have to invest time in making sure that you understand how to do that, how to manage that software, how to use that software, how to access it. And same with your property managers. Some of the newer age players like ourselves, some of the newer age companies and software offerings try to really focus on being a little bit more intuitive. It's the age of the iPhone, right? People want to pick it up and start using it right away. And we work really, really hard to make sure that that's possible. So I always advise folks, give it a test run first, play around with it. I tell them that with Innago too. I say, hey, don't just start using it with all your properties. Try a property, see how it goes. We're confident that you're going to love it, but make sure that you do. And make sure that there's not a different software that's going to be a better fit. So there's a lot out there. Most of them will give you a free trial, or like Innago, it's going to be free from the start. So make sure that you're playing around with a few of them and figuring out which one makes the most sense for you.
What are there certain size, properties or businesses that we should, maybe consider one software over another?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of the software does segment. So you've got your, Cozy, for example, which really works great for folks that have less than 5 units. And if they go beyond that, it's going to get a little bit tricky. Or you've got your, Yardi has a bunch of different segments that they offer, but on their biggest side, they're working with people with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of units sometimes, which obviously is a totally different platform and has totally different requirements. One of the things that we tried to bring to the table when we built Innago is this understanding that most people don't get into real estate thinking, I'm going to buy 1 unit and then I'm going to stop, right? Or I'm going to buy 5 units and that'll be the end of it. they want to become, a real estate mogul. They want to have a bunch of units. They want to build a portfolio. They want to have their retirement and a lot of passive income. So a lot of folks start with just a handful of units, and then they expand bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you're constantly switching your property management software as you're growing and growing, it can be a real challenge from an administrative standpoint, just understanding and also setting those expectations for your tenants. Because if you're swapping in and out, it's a little bit challenging. So we tried to build Innago in such a way that works with folks that have just a single unit, or works with folks, our largest, I think, has 1,500 units. So it's a pretty wide range for us, but there are definitely different softwares that are targeting specific segments. So again, be aware of what they think that they can manage effectively, what they are planning to manage effectively, and understand where you kind of slot into that.
If we do plan to change software, or if the company, management company's planning to change software, let's say, we're self-managing, our units, when should we change? Is that going to be, I would think when I exit a property, I'm going to start it when I buy the next property. And it seems like it would be difficult to swap that in the middle of ownership of a property, unless it was just horrible enough that I just had to do it.
Right. No, you're exactly right. It can be really difficult. And it kind of depends on what type of properties you manage. Student housing, they have a nice little window where they can typically swap out management software, experiment with different software, and really change things about their practice in general, because they have a new batch of students moving in. Oftentimes they have, 2 weeks to a month to get the units prepared and get their own administrative stuff all ironed out. But if you're in residential space, if you have, 5 different multifamily buildings with 50 different tenants in those units, and maybe you sell one, buy another, but you still own the others and they're still leased up, there's not really a great time to do it. Now, there's one kind of minor exception. Typically, we see most turnover in the summer, right around July. That can be a decent time, although by the same token, you might be busy dealing with that turnover. So there's never really a wonderful time. We always advise avoid the first of the month. That's when the most craziness is going to happen. So if you are looking to switch, target the 15th of the month, target the 10th of the month, target after rent has all been collected, after you're done communicating with your tenants on late fees and hopefully not notices to quit, but perhaps notices to quit, whatever else it may be. Make sure you've gotten past that part and you've got enough of a buffer before next month's rental, due date. So middle of the month is usually best, but there's not really a great time of year, unfortunately.
Would you say maybe keep the old software operating for a month and keep them both operating, and the new one for maybe a month before we turn the old one off?
Absolutely. And like I mentioned before, we actually suggest try it with one unit, give it a shot with just a couple of units that are maybe more apt. Maybe the reason that you're switching software is because you had 3 or 4 units that had a terrible experience and the software wasn't that great to begin with, and it's a little bit expensive. Take those 3 or 4 units that had a bad experience. They're motivated to try something different. Switch them over to the new software, have them both operating at once. And once you're comfortable, then you can move the rest of your tenants over. And make sure you have a game plan for that transfer. Make sure, again, you're communicating with your tenants independent of the software. You're saying, hey, we're going to switch over to Innago, right? We're going to have this new email going out to you where you'll have your own access. Be on the lookout for that. Make sure that that's all communicated. And just like you said, having them both operate at the same time can be a great way to kind of smooth out that transition.
So what about the mobile experience? You're talking about like on the iPhone, that's a great example. So what about the mobile experience for the tenant, and what should that include? Like, can they sign leases, pay their rent, late fees, maintenance items? Could you elaborate a little bit on what all can be done there? And is it going to, kind of take out so much of the communication between us and the tenants, or the tenant having to come to leasing office and things like that? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's another awesome thing to ask of whatever property management software you go with, because some do offer apps, some don't offer apps. And some have really prioritized that mobile experience and some haven't. With Innago, all the features that are available to tenants on their desktop are also available on their phone. So they can sign leases, they can, go through the application process and be screened. They can communicate back and forth with their landlord, and their landlord, of course, can communicate back to them. Another great feature is maintenance. They can take pictures and video on their phone, which just makes that maintenance reporting process a little bit easier. And the reason you want to offer a nice mobile experience isn't just because your tenants are saying, hey, I like to do things on my phone. You want it to be at their fingertips. If they get a notification on their phone that says, hey, it's time to pay rent via email, but they can only access that rental payment from their desktop. If they're out, with their kids, because it's, pumpkin picking season or whatever it might be, they may say, oh yeah, I'll take care of that when I get home. And then it slips their mind. And then what good is that notification? It's not useful anymore. But if they can access it right from their phone, if they can click a button in that email, open up that invoice and submit the payment right then and there, that makes a huge difference. So this day and age, I really wouldn't even look at software that doesn't offer some sort of mobile experience to your users.
Like that. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of almost a necessary, not evil, but I mean, it's like a must. It's so common now. Everybody has an app for everything, right? And to make it that easy for them, I feel like you're going to be a lot more likely to get paid. Like you're talking about, notification and setting that up automatically where they're getting those, the system is sending them those notifications, right? And it's taking less time out of our day for for our manager or whoever to, in the leasing office to go over to that unit, knock on the door or call them and all those things, and then the tenant, we know the tenant has their phone on them, right? That's like
that's exactly right. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, sometimes at your expense, right?
That's right. That's right. And so then we know that they're getting those notifications. And what about signing leases and things like that? Is that done through the system or any systems that do that?
Yeah, we offer online lease signing. There are a handful of others that do as well. Again, not every system does, so another thing to be aware of and another thing to look at. But we do offer online lease signing both from the desktop or from mobile. The e-sign, I think it went into effect since 2001. So it's been going on for quite a while. They hold up in court just as well as what you call a wet signature, kind of a traditional signature. And there are some advantages to it as well. We keep an audit trail. So we have listed down the IP address that the user accessed it from, the email address that they accessed it from, the time, and the location. So there's quite a bit of information there that you don't get on a wet signature. And the folks can sign from their phone. They can use their finger and scribble on it. They can type their name in. They can take a picture of their actual signature and upload that onto the lease. It makes it really easy to get that lease signed digitally. And we also always tell folks, this doesn't mean you shouldn't still meet with the tenant. This doesn't mean you can't still do a walkthrough. It just means instead of having to print a lease off beforehand and bring it, you can generate it on the fly right then after you do the walkthrough. You can say, okay, you guys want to sign it? Let's do it right now. Send the lease off. They pull up their phones, click a button, put their signature down. Of course, they should, take a good look at the lease and you can run through some things with them. But it does make that process a lot simpler when it needs to be.
Can the manager do that from their phone or tablet or something like that as they're standing there with that potential tenant?
They can, and they can also make edits as they need to. So we work on a template system, and everybody does lease signing a little bit differently. So again, something worth investigating. But we work on a template-based system. So you have these preset templates that you upload and create in Innago, and then you can send that template off. Right before you send it, you have an opportunity to make final edits to that particular lease that don't affect the template as a whole. So if your tenant sits there and negotiates with you over having a pet, or they negotiate with you over paying the water or paying the electricity, you can make those changes on the fly and still send it off to your tenants, which is, of course, another hassle when you have a paper one printed off and now you're scribbling all over it and putting paragraphs down and adding whatever to it to make sure that it fits what you guys just negotiated.
No, that's very beneficial. And what about if let's say I take a video of the walkthrough while I've got the tenant there, with that same tablet or phone, can I upload that somehow to that like tenant file or anything like that through the software?
You can actually, yeah. You can upload files into Innago independent of the lease agreement. So it can be for anything like a driver's license that you want to keep on file, or a video walkthrough that you did right before they moved in. And whenever you upload a file, you can also decide whether or not you want the tenants to have access to it. So if it is something like a driver's license and it's 3 or 4 tenants, maybe you don't want them all having access to each other's driver's license. You can have those invisible to the tenant, and then the walkthrough, so you want them to see what the condition was at the time of move-in. You make that visible to the tenants. They can all access that at any time. Again, full transparency and better communication. It's the key to better management.
Love that. And I will tell the listeners, Dave did not send me these questions ahead of time. I used to manage, I used to manage my own units, years ago. And so I was thinking about, when I would do a walkthrough, I'd have my folder there and my leases, in my hand, and I'm ready to, to fill it out and all this stuff if I felt like they were qualified, back when I was making all kinds of management mistakes. And, but one thing I would always do is I would video the unit, and I would, I would get the tenants in the video. right? I mean, on purpose.
Yeah, sure.
And I would tell them I'm going to do it, so that way they know I've videoed the entire unit with them there. It shows they were there. And sometimes I would even have them say a little something at the end saying, I accept this unit. It's in good shape, whatever, in the shape that it's in. And then, and I like the idea also of, lay their licenses out there on the counter and get those in there at the same time. And so anyway, and that's awesome if it was systemized to where it's uploaded to a secure place, like a software and tenant file and things like that. So then you could go right to that tenant and find that video. Then their licenses are going to be there and, the documents signed in there. That's great stuff. But a few questions, though, before we run out of time, David. And, what's a way that you all have recently improved your business that we could all apply to ours?
Way that we have improved our business. Well, I tell you what, we have recently made some hires. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. I think it's one thing, especially when you're a small company, if everybody kind of knows what to do and they're all doing a great job. But can you replicate that as you bring more people on? And having things written down, going through the process of sitting in front of a whiteboard and putting out, how do we transfer knowledge to this person? How do we get them up to speed quickly? How do we effectively communicate to them everything that they need to know in order to, sorry, the lights keep going off in this room here. They're on a motion sensor. How do we effectively communicate that to our own internal hires? That's really important. So I would say taking the time to invest in that process is going to save you a ton of time and a ton of effort in the long run.
Awesome. And what's one thing that's contributed to your success?
I'd say a lot of passion for what we're doing. Getting excited about waking up and going to work every day is so critical, and making sure that everybody on your team is excited, that everybody's buying in, that, people always harp on culture, but it really is so critical to make sure that everybody's excited, everybody's fully bought in, everybody's invested in the success of the company, and in the success in what you're doing. And for us, it's trying to help landlords make their lives easier, but everybody sits and thinks about anything they do, and that's always at the top of their mind. They're always wondering, how is this going to make somebody's life easier today? And I think having that passion, having that excitement is really critical.
And before we have to go, tell the listeners how you like to give back.
So I personally just volunteer around the community. We are so busy with Innago, we haven't had a ton of time to think about how Innago can give back, other than just, again, making it easier for landlords and tenants to communicate. But that's definitely something we want to prioritize in the future. We've talked a lot about it, actually, because there are so many opportunities in the real estate space. But personally, I volunteer at a swim club. I do some Habitat for Humanity type stuff. I try to stay involved as much as I can.
Nice. I appreciate you sharing that, Dave. And I appreciate you sharing your expertise today, just in everything about the property management software, and really the time I feel like, I should take to evaluate the software that my management team are using. And, maybe they're stuck in that system that was, 10 to 15 years old if they've been in this business a long time, and they've never taken the time to really switch their system to a more updated or more modern, software that could be more efficient. And I appreciate you laying out those things that we need to ask, or, even things that we didn't even know that this system could do. But you also tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us online at innago.com. It's just INNAGO.com. We also have active Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn profiles. We're always posting interesting articles that we find online, or interesting research that we do ourselves in managing properties and finding great real estate investments and all the above. So you can reach out to us any of those places. You can also contact me directly. I always like to give out my direct phone number and email. So here it is. Dave@innago.com is my email. You can reach me at 513-543-0759. I'm always willing to talk to a landlord.
And Innago is INNAGO.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.